Alright, I go on Reddit by the For the Lulz account. I am 20 years old, and I live in the USA, and I'm a nymphomaniac. The answer to this is really yes and no. I was actually homeschooled up until about high school, and up until that point I was in a very religious family, and it wasn't any of the typical browbeating Christianity that people on Reddit love to hear about so much, but it was more of just, it wasn't spoken of. And there was a situation early on in my life where my mother became quite worried that I was going to start showing sexuality, and this was around before I turned 13. And she sat me down and essentially said that all men would ever want me for was sex, and not in a you're worthless sort of way, but in a men are evil sort of way, which I don't ascribe to, obviously. But I didn't have any actual sex education until I was in high school, and at that point it was mostly a reiteration of things that everybody else had been exposed to. And such a sex education in the U.S. is not great in general. It's mostly here. There are these things named condoms. They are magical, but if you have sex, you will get pregnant and die. So that's more or less what I went through, and the rest of it was really just stuff that I encountered on my own. Actually, my first experience wasn't with a guy. It was actually with a woman, and I use the word woman lightly because we were both underage at the time, and we were both fairly young, and more or less it was just a lot of not kissing. I didn't have my first kiss until I was about 17, but there was a lot of groping, and more or less at that point I realized that, oh hey, other people aren't that bad, because I've always had a thing about people touching me. I'm not particularly comfortable with close contact, except for in a religious, not religious, romantic sense. And it was at that time that I kind of had this, I don't know, sexual awakening, more like, where I was like, oh, this is the thing that exists. So that was probably when I was 12. The first serious experience I ever had sexually was actually when I was 18, which wasn't that long ago. But I was aware up until that point that I was a nymphomaniac, and I tried very hard to control that. I was very, I suppose people would call me standoffish, because I was hyper aware of my condition. I was hyper aware of the fact that I was turned on at all times, and that made me very uncomfortable, especially around people I didn't like. So I always seemed very standoffish, and I suppose that's partially to blame for my late blooming, so to speak. But I was about 18, and I was dating a guy at the time. We've since parted ways, and I was we had been making out, and I turned to him, and he knew I was a virgin, and I said to him, I am terrified, but I want to try this. And it lasted probably 30 seconds because it hurt like a motherfucker. But he was very considerate about the whole thing, and he was quite experienced, so he knew what he was doing, and he knew how I would react. And more or less, it was a very painful first experience for me, and I was like, I don't see why I desire this so much. It was all very confusing why I was turned on, and yet this hurt so goddamn badly. I realized that I was turned on all the time when I first entered high school, because that's something that I didn't really think about before then. It was something that existed in my head, but and in my physicality, obviously, but I just didn't think about it because there was no outlet for me to think about that. And then you get into high school, and suddenly sex is something people talk about, and it's all very it's very much more open than the culture I'd been experiencing prior to that. And I realized I'm turned on a lot more than other people are. And I heard people, especially girls, talking about how, oh, older girls than myself saying that they wanted that their boyfriend wanted more sex from them, that they were tired. And found myself realizing that I didn't have those feelings, that I was very much, I really strongly desired that. And I didn't know why, as I hadn't experienced it, but that I desired it very strongly and all the time. And that was sort of terrifying in a way to know that you are an outlier in a culture that already doesn't exactly condone sexuality in women. But the way it's normally affected my life is that it's very hard to maintain. There's always this sort of haze that people talk about when they're turned on, where they can't think really very straight. And as I sit here and I talk to you, I'm aware that I'm talking to you, but at the same time, there's that nagging sensation in the back of my head, or I know that I have that desire to have sex with my boyfriend, that I'm very much turned on, that, it's that haze over everything I do. Or part of it is playing poker face whenever I have a wave of, feelings about that. And, looking people dead in the face and maintaining conversations, while at the same time covering up the fact that my body is basically fighting me at every available opportunity. I will obviously copious amounts of masturbation, but I I just anything can turn me on, really can trigger that. Like, I not obviously there are some things that decidedly don't trigger that. Like, obviously horror stories don't do anything for me, but things like if I arch my neck the wrong way or the right way, so to speak, I have a vision into my head of, something, various states of erotic uh, ideas will enter my head, and I'll be turned on. I'll go to bend over and pick something up, and something will enter my head, and I'll be turned on. Really, anything that involves physicality can turn me on. I'm attracted to hands very much. I'm attracted to shoulders. I'm attracted to a great deal many things. Above all, I'm attracted to personalities, but that they all, in various states, can trigger little things in my brain that are like, oh, time to go. And that can be highly unpleasant, especially if it's someone, like I said, that I don't particularly like. But I've grown used to it. I think everybody does, as much as possible. So I uh, I feel like the answer to that question of do I is certainly yes. Um, I I think I started. I didn't. I think I started around 12, and the first time that happened, I immediately went and to repent to God and beg for forgiveness. But so I would on and off over maybe the course of 2 years, I would play around with that, and then I'd think that I had committed some great evil in the eyes of a higher power, and go and repent and swear off of it, and then it would happen again like 3 or 4 months later. And that happened up until around I was 16, at which point I ceased to care. And I would say, for me, it generally has to be a daily thing. I'm often very, very busy, so, and that's part of a product of my being turned on all the time. You keep busy so you don't think about it. But at least once a day for me. And generally I do it without the aid of toys or vibrators or anything. I just use my hands because that's what I've grown used to. And sometimes I will use a toy or two. Generally it's more for the gratification of my now boyfriend. But I yeah, generally I just use my hands, and it's generally once a day, though I have been known, when I have the time, to take a good chunk of time out of my day and have perhaps three in a row. And that's not difficult for me, though my hand grows very tired. No, it does not. It does not change. Of course, there are times when I don't really want to, like, when I'm sick, when I'm exhausted, when I'm extremely upset over something. Generally, when I'm angry, I can't have sex when I'm angry, because I'm just not predisposed to angry sex, I suppose. But on average, I've used this phrase before, and I'll use it again. That I find myself pretty much willing to go at a moment's notice. And obviously there has to be foreplay involved, but I'm pretty much always ready. And it's it's really very consistent, generally speaking, even up to like 30 minutes after a prior session, I'm ready to go again. I think I waited around a week, and I surprised myself because I was like, oh, that was really very unpleasant. That did not feel good, and I couldn't put it out of my mind that had happened, and of course, there's still that insatiable urge in me. So I approached my boyfriend and I wrote him a note saying that we should try again, and we did, and it still hurt. It took probably about a week for it to start becoming pleasant for me. Um, and that's because I'm actually very small framed in general. I'm only about right now I'm only about 120 pounds and I'm 5'8". So that's 20 pounds underweight, and it's I'm very small. So I can imagine that that was probably a good factor in why it took so long for me to get anywhere close to enjoying myself. But oh, that's the funny thing. I actually did not orgasm until my current boyfriend ever. But have never failed to make sure that my partner orgasms. Um, so he would get off one way or another. I was perfectly willing to do that. I've never held any ill will over that. I take a certain degree of pleasure in it. So he thought it was just great. I've used the phrase of it being like a puzzle box. I'm like, none of it makes any sense. Girls claim they want longer is better, but you get about 2 inches in and feel this soft, spongy spot, and that's the spot you want to hit. So what the hell are we doing looking for larger? you know? I've had sex with about 3 different people. I'm a serial monogamist, I suppose I would call it. I'm not particularly given to one night stands. Generally speaking, the people I sleep with are people I'm highly attracted to on an emotional level, and I don't really care to change that because if anything, my nymphomania has made me more discerning in who I sleep with because it also has the added disadvantage of making me seem highly aloof because of how often I'm spending just trying to control it. People won't speak to me because I think I have no interest in speaking to them. So often when I get people who are willing to speak with me, who are willing to be friends with me, I don't compromise that. I actually did, and I wound up dating him. It was very peculiar. I had known the guy for some time, but we hadn't been close until recently. And at that point, I essentially said we should do this, and it was very much nerve wracking almost for me at first because I had no idea what I had gotten myself into. That he proved to be the largest person I've ever seen in my life, but so it was unsettling at first, but he took a great deal of care in trying to make sure that he followed through as well, and it ended up being very enjoyable for both of us, and obviously it became a constant thing, and now there's a relationship with it. I've tried a lot of different things. By nature I'm experimental. I like experimenting with hair color. I like experimenting with piercings, with nails, with brands, just about anything. I'm just an experimenter, and normalcy bores me. So generally speaking, I try to come up with something new to try every time. So I've done a lot of different things. I've yet to do things like orgies or group sex, though we're tentatively batting that one around. But I've done we've done a bit of tying up. There's been role play. We've done all of the typical positions. Obviously, we've done anal. We've done public sex. Um, there's a list. It's actually easier for me to say what we haven't done, which is anything involving a great deal of pain on my part because I'm sensitive. I'm not a good choice to hurt because I can't take the pain. Although I have been whipped with a belt before. Um, I haven't done anything that requires, like I said, group sex. I haven't done that, but I I also haven't done anything that requires uh, other objects, like being inserted into another person. Like, I haven't tried to insert anything into my boyfriend, but he's done the opposite to me, which I'm totally alright with. But I'm really trying to think of things we haven't done. Oh, yes, I am. Actually, we've made like a list because he currently lives a ways away from me. So we've made a list of things we want to try. One of them, of course, is your very standard fare schoolgirl outfit thing, which I actually haven't done that yet, bizarrely enough. Um, you'd think that would come in before anal or something, but no, it hasn't. So we're planning on doing that one. Another one is we've planned on doing what I suppose would be called an all-day teasing thing, where at various points during the day, he'll pull me aside and tease me a little, and then we'll go back to whatever we're doing quite normally. And at the end of the day, of course, I'll be just about ready to tear him apart. So we're planning on doing that. Um, there. Oh, I'm gonna grab the list. I actually have it right here. We are looking at doing a thing where we go to an orgy, except less of me being shared and more of he wants to show me off, which I'm all right with too, because he's a bit of an exhibitionist. So like I said, I'm an experimenter, so I'm all right with that. So that happens to be what's on our itinerary for now, but I'm sure there will be more. As far as things that I don't want to do, I have very little interest in things that involve pain. Like, I can give pain. I'm quite willing to bite the ever-loving shit out of my boyfriend, which he does like quite a bit. But I'm not willing to do things that involve, needles being inserted into me. Please, no. To be, generally the sadomasochism is not my bag. It is interesting for me, because of the complete hedonism behind it. It's an appealing concept, yes. I'm willing to try it. Well, because I'm naturally a very shy person, and I don't know how to go about finding those things. I mean, it's not like you put out an ad in the paper and say single female with boyfriend seeking group sex. It's a bit of a thing to do. I could try Facebook. I'm not sure how many of my friends are involved in that. I've had invitations on Reddit, but I'm less inclined to trust Reddit. Well, my first foray into that was really that we left. I have a balcony in my apartment, and we left the balcony doors open, and that opens out into a large courtyard where everyone, in theory, could hear me. So that was really the first thing we did. That was sort of semi-public. And when I went and picked up the boyfriend slash one night stand at the airport when he came to see me, um, I got dragged into my car and we had sex in a public terminal. Um, we were in the car, but obviously anybody could have looked inside and seen us, so that was sort of public. Um, there have been situations where I've dragged exes of mine into different rooms during parties. Um, in theory, anyone could have heard us once again. In theory, anyone could have walked in. Often this didn't happen, but it actually happened once, and that was very awkward. We were at an ex-boyfriend's house, and I pulled him into another room, and we started getting hot and heavy, and he pulled off my shirt, and just as soon as he was about to go down on me, his mother came over and entered the room. That was unpleasant. no, but people were able to discern what was going on. Oh, actually, there actually was one where we were seen. That was recently. I had the boyfriend and a friend of mine over, and we were all having a slumber party of sorts, I suppose. And he and I went to the bathroom, which is set into my room, and we had sex. And when we came back out, she was up and on her computer instead of being asleep, and looked up, and the jig was up. We knew that she had heard and seen pretty much everything, but she made fun of us relentlessly. It was very funny. She's a good sport. To this day, she'll like start slapping her hands against one another and look at him meaningfully. He has tied me up. Specifically bound my arms, mostly behind me. Um, although we're I don't have a bed with a headboard, so at some point he's planning on tying me to things, which would probably be easier. Um, but it's mostly been me getting the tied up treatment, although I have bound him to a chair once and made him watch me. That was fun. But, yes, it's mostly been him tying me up. He hasn't tied up my legs or anything so far, because he's rather large, as I've mentioned, and that would just make things problematic. I actually have that. I have that image in mind. Yes, I plan on at some point saying that we should do that. Uh, because I have a habit of when it feels very good for me, I have a really bad habit of trying to push them away because it's almost too much. Because obviously I'm very repressed all the time, and it's it's very intense for me. So I plan on being completely tied up at one point, so I can't do that, so I can properly enjoy it. It was actually my idea. Um, and the appeal to that for me about that is that I find my boyfriend extremely attractive. I find him one of the most attractive people I've ever laid eyes on, and I there's something very uh, taboo about being fiddled with in that way in public. First of all, and second of all, because he's going to be making me wait. I'm used to waiting, obviously, but there's something worse about having it be present, being right there and able to do that freely, and not being able to until later. And it's extremely arousing, I suppose the word is, and it's also very it works me up. I just get very turned on by the idea of not being able to have my way with him until later. Generally, I'm actually very submissive. I like I said already, I like to make sure that my partners always have a really good time. So that generally lends itself to being very submissive. I'm a fan of being tied up and dominated, but I also equally enjoy being in a very equal position of power with the person whom I am with. I I like being able to know that I can turn them on and hold them captive to that as much as they can hold me captive. And that there's a sort of liberation in having that equality and that communication. But as far as me being dominant, I'm not given to that. I'm not particularly dominant myself. I can be. I can turn people on if I wish. It's not difficult for me. I know being turned on constantly myself makes me know how things tick when it comes to getting someone else aroused. And in that sense, I can be extremely dominant, especially with women, which I'm unfortunately more of a tease at because I never follow through. But I am very submissive. Uh, mostly it's uh, mostly it's being told what the other party wishes to do to me, like knowing that they're very much turned on and they're going to push me down and they're going to have their way with me. It's like a release of control almost. And I'm very controlled in my day-to-day life, so I suppose that must be why I'm so attracted to that. You know, the matter has been taken out of my hands. I'm a willing participant, but it's been taken out of my hands, and I am going basically it's pleasure that I don't have to worry about. Yes. In a word, yes. Generally, it happens when I haven't been able to take care of myself for a couple of days, whether I've been sick or exhausted, or I just haven't had time. I It'll start where it's very hard for me to restrain myself vocally, where I'll be in public and I want to make a noise or make a sound because I get a shudder or sudden pleasurable experience, and it's then that I know that I really have to go and handle it. Sometimes this has led to me walking. I work in a costume shop, and by costume shop I mean I make costumes for a theater. I'll walk off into the prop room where no one is and it's very quiet, and I'll go in there where no one can hear me and I'll make a noise. You know, I'll make some sort of a sound and try and get that out and try and handle it later. If I can't, I will go into another closet and I will just basically hole myself up in there, or wait until my lunch break and then go and handle it there. It was probably after I'd been sick for some time and my hands and wrists really hurt, so I couldn't actually take care of it. And my boyfriend was out of town. And I got to the point where it had been a couple of days, and when he finally came back in town, it was so bad that I was actually whimpering. Like I couldn't actually keep myself under control anymore. I couldn't not do the physical signs of it. It was it was really a pretty brutal situation for me. It was all I could really think about. It was not manageable. It just the term blue balls doesn't cover it because it becomes all encompassing at that point and you can't do anything about it. Yes. I when you're a nymphomaniac, obviously, most people with nymphomania will display the nymphomania by sex addiction. They can't maintain normal, healthy relationships because they need sex so often that they need it now, and it can really ruin your relationships with people when you constantly need that physicality when you're addicted to it. Um, for me, the way I combated it very early on was to immerse myself in something that required a great deal of work. And this started with taking college classes in high school. And as a result, I am actually getting to graduate early, which is very nice. Um, but now it's a matter of me working 3 jobs and going to school full time. And as you can imagine, that's a brutal schedule. And it's really all to the point of making sure that I don't do something that I'm going to regret. Because obviously, some people can have sex without emotions, and some people can't. I'm one of those people that doesn't, but I could, and I don't want to because obviously I care for the emotional state of my boyfriend, and I don't desire to hurt him because I love him very much. And so it's a constant, working myself, A, because I know I can, because I know I'm good at what I do, and B, because I'm keeping myself in check. I I think about that sometimes. Right now, I haven't managed, but I've thought about it, and there have been situations where I've had copious amounts of downtime, and I still haven't done anything reckless. So I think that when it comes time for me to slow down, I'm not going to eject myself into the world with full force and undo everything I've ever done. So I think at a point I'm just training myself right now to ignore it. The longest time I've gone without a boyfriend. Now, this is a funny subject because I've only slept with 3 people and I've dated 11. Um, so the time period between me having boyfriends. The longest date, the longest one would probably be, oh, 6 months. Quite easy. As I said, that I grew up in a religious family, and I had this delusion in my head that I was going to manage to not have sex until marriage, which is good and well for some people, props to you, not disparaging anyone's life choice, but I can't manage that. But as I said, I've had about 7 people I haven't slept with that I had the opportunity to, and well, one of them was Mormon, so I guess only 6 people. Uh, it was very easy for me because I made it clear. I always told them from the get-go, I was like, I'm not interested in sex. I'm not interested in having sex. If you can't take a relationship with me on that level, which is totally respectable, and I'm fine if you say no to that, because people have different things they want. If you say you can't handle that, then we obviously aren't going to be compatible, and I wish you well, and we can be friends still, but we can't have a relationship. And funnily enough, no one ever said no to that, and no one ever pressured me after that. So it just really came down to no one talked to me about it. And that was just fine by me, because if someone had offered, I would have gone for it. Because I didn't want to. Most of these relationships happened before I was about 16, and I was actually a very hyper-aware young teenager. I knew that I didn't know a lot of things about masturbation and stuff like that, and contraceptives and safe sex. I didn't know a lot of these things, and I was aware of that. And I knew that the person I was with probably didn't take as much time as I did thinking about that. So I didn't try because I didn't have the means to go out and afford these things. I didn't have the ability to go out and find things that would have made that safe. So I abstained from it completely because I knew that if I didn't, it would probably wind up badly. I was frightened of accidentally getting pregnant, for one. I was I was frightened of sleeping with someone at a young age, getting attached to them as young teenagers are wont to do, get attached to someone who they've had sex with, girls more than guys, and then something happening in the relationship just going to pieces, which happened a lot, obviously. It always happens to young people. And I understood that introducing sex into a relationship can make things more complicated at that age. And I was quite worried. And I think from now, at the standpoint, I think I was understandably worried about the ramifications of that. Yes. I never encountered that with any of my boyfriends. They didn't ask me. And that perhaps contributed to a feeling of physical inadequacy on my part, where I was like, am I not beautiful? Am I not physically attractive? Which I now see was, them actually obeying my wishes and respecting me, which I do respect very much in hindsight. Um, but I think if they had said that they wanted to, I probably would have caved immediately. Yes, I would have. I don't know that I would have liked to, but had they asked, I would have given in. I actually haven't been with another girl since then, aside from kissing, and generally making them feel uncomfortable because apparently I'm a hopeless flirt when it comes to women. I've discovered that I have a talent where I can make women feel very aroused very quickly, despite the fact that most of them are straight, which is very uncomfortable for them. I always make sure to do it in a comfortable atmosphere, though, where they know that I don't mean it seriously, and where they know that if they are really very uncomfortable, they can tell me to stop, and I will. But I've discovered a great deal, being a woman myself, obviously, about what makes women become turned on, about what makes them, breathe harder, so to speak. And I sometimes manipulate that. But I haven't actually taken a sexual experience with a woman since then. well, well, of course you are, but it's generally things like, oh, it's this approach, and for lack of a better word, I always turn people to look at villains in movies. Like villains like Loki is a good one for right now. The way they talk and this confidence that they have, where they look at this woman, and of course, no woman ever wants to be with this kind of person, but the character Loki in the movie Avengers, he I've never actually seen it, but I'm told that this is how it is. They you just exude this kind of in control sort of sense, where almost it's not demeaning, but it's very much in charge. It's in control, and it's an almost aggressive form of, you are very, very attractive to me, and I'm going to let you know that in as almost poetic a sense as possible. And that's really what I play on. It's a fine balance to go between perversion and flattery, and women respond very well to that. It's something that I've toyed with. Generally, pulling on poetry has worked best for me, just speaking in that poetic sort of sense. And it's obviously a very fun challenge for me because nobody speaks like that anymore, but women love hearing it. I find it interesting because I have very few talents with people outside of the sexual realm, and one of these talents happens to be that I can make women feel very much attractive. And it'll generally start with something like, the woman will say something innocuous like, uh, what was it? There was one the other day, and she said something innocuous like, uh, someone talked like someone who knew what they wanted. And I turned to her and I was like, I said, whenever I speak to you, do you know what I want? And of course, she immediately got flustered with that. And she was like, no, no, stop. She's like, stop. You're going to make me blush. And I was like, oh, but you should blush more. Because all I know that when I see you blush, it's like a rose bursting into bloom. And of course, it went from there. She's a lot easier. The person in question at the time is a lot easier to get than some other people, because she responds very, very well to that kind of poetic language. But it's this sort of, it's just this persona that I use, and it's very to see people respond physically, to see that you can elicit that reaction, and perhaps it's a bit manipulative, but I always make sure that the person has a measure of control in saying when they want it to stop, and when they're uncomfortable with it, and if it's alright for me to do that. I never take it out of their hands, but I make them feel like it is. If ever anything went south with this boyfriend, and I'm desperately hoping not, because I am attracted to him in ways that I couldn't have imagined. But I am actually bisexual, so I would not mind doing things with a woman. I, provided, once again, that my quota of them being just an interesting person in general is met. But, I don't think about it that often. I talk about it when I'm prompted to, and I don't often talk about my sexuality in general, because obviously there's a lot of misinformation about nymphomania. There's a lot of a taboo against the idea of women having sex in general, which is completely, what even is this? People have sex with someone. A great deal, majority of people are straight. Who do you think they're having sex with? But it's when I do talk about sex, it's generally in the capacity of talking about it with my boyfriend. And if not him, then I have friends or former friends of mine who are virginal or were virginal and approached me and asked for advice or things of that nature. And I'm not sure why they elected me. Perhaps I'm less subtle than I think I am with my nymphomania, but I would always tell them very frankly and upfront what I thought about, sex and advice about things. And I don't really speak about it that often, though. Just when prompted, which isn't often. Yeah, or when someone asks me on Reddit. Or when I volunteer to be asked on Reddit. It is important for me to hide it. Because I outside of the people I have dated, I did have problems in the past where I was more upfront with it around people I shouldn't have been upfront about it around, and it backfired horribly for me. Where people would, it's not unlike some of the reactions that I got on Reddit, where I'd get harassing messages saying that they wanted to do X and Y to me or with me, as if I was a willing participant just because I was turned on. Just because you're aroused doesn't mean you want to have sex with that particular person, And many people took it that way. So to save myself, to spare myself the trouble of being harassed, I don't mention it because it's not something, like I said, not something a lot of people understand, and it's not something that a lot of people take the time to understand outside of, oh, this girl's a slut, I most all of my close circle of friends know I am. And they pretty much took it in stride with a little curiosity, but otherwise they've left me alone about it. Um, uh, some of my exes now, the ones I've slept with at least, um, and they were all extremely pleased by that, but they didn't bring it up except to brag to their guy friends, which I'm not sure how it's a bragging point that your girlfriend has a mental disorder that makes her turned on all the time, but I can see the appeal, but it's still funny. But no, it's more like, look how much sex I'm getting rather than anything else. But it no, people's reactions generally when I've told them myself in an environment that I could control, where I was like, oh yes, I'm an nymphomaniac, this is what it's like. Generally, it's been just like, oh, okay, and then it doesn't really come up aside from the usual questions. But I have had people who have been extremely aggressive about it. I've had people, like the people who found out that I was an nymphomaniac, treated me very poorly. They treated me very aggressively. Um, it generally the reactions are neutral, but the reactions that I cannot control are wildly inaccurate to who I am. Generally, the first one is, you mean all the time? and and because I'm a girl, obviously it's not like I'm walking around with a raging boner in my pants, but it's harder for people to imagine that a female is turned on for various social stigma reasons that we haven't quite gotten over in the march of time, but also because there's this perhaps not entirely incorrect stigma of women just being less interested in sex than men are. Like I said, it's probably not entirely inaccurate, but so it's always unsettling for people coming from a girl, because there's almost this unfair expectation that men should be turned on all the time. And aside from that, there's the question of, oh, you're turned on all the time. There's the question of, how much sex do you get? There's the question of always the orgy question comes up. Have you slept with more than one person at a time? Not yet. Those tend to be the more usual questions. Um, oh wow, that's a good one. Probably the time I got my first orgasm. That was one of the best experiences, because, like I said, I've been with two other guys who had failed over the course of a year each. this isn't like we had slept together 3 times and I'd just never come. It was a year each, so 2 years being sexually active without ever orgasming. And obviously that was highly frustrating to me. But my now boyfriend managed to do that 3 times in a row in the first session we had, and I was a very, very happy woman after that. It was extremely fond memory for me to look back on. It was extremely pleasant. Um, Other than that, I'd say probably there was a moment where with an ex of mine, um, which unfortunately with an ex of mine, I wish this had been with my current boyfriend, but where we were having sex, and something, he was like, I was sitting on top of him and he was up beside me, so we were facing each other and he had his arms around me, and he did something, and it hit me in just the right way to where there was this sudden extreme emotional connection, and it was amazing. It's one of those things that people talk about, but you don't really know until it happens, and it was wonderful. And I kind of basked in that for a couple minutes, and then we kept doing what we were doing. I was like, no, 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 stop! You have to stop and let me have this moment for a second. I've no idea what it was. All I know is that something happened, and then I think it was an accident. Honestly, I think he messed up something, and he was going to fix it. And in that moment, it worked out, and happy accident. And we never could replicate that again, which is fair since we're broken up now. But mm, this one is very attentive. He, not to say that the other two weren't. I'm not going to disparage someone for their sexual prowess, but and the other two were just fine. But this one is extremely attentive, partially because he's less experienced than the other two, and he's extremely sweet in that he has a very strong desire to be satisfying, and as such, our communication is a lot better, where it's less of the second reaction, where you just go and do what you're thinking should be done, and more of what should we do now while we're in the middle of it. And, one of us shoots back with something, and then we go and do it, and it's great. It's a lot more. A lot of people don't go for that style of thing because it seems so not organic to most people, but the way it works between us, it's very much so. We have discussions about it afterwards. We're like, this worked, this didn't work. I really liked it when you do this, and afterwards we can take that and we can apply it to the next time. And those discussions are often they're almost bonding moments where we can be frank with one another and talk about it, about what we enjoy about the other person. And it's a bit of an ego boost, really, for both of us. Well, he likes to hear about how well he's doing. And I like to hear about how happy it makes him. Nipple play. And I know that's a bizarre one. Most girls enjoy that. I hate it. I can't stand it. Get your hands off my nipples. Oh yeah. I watch what some of my friends refer to as straight guy porn. um, I I actually started watching because I didn't know how to give blowjobs. And obviously I wasn't going to ask someone, and the Cosmo is about as good for sex advice as lighting your pants on fire is for your skin. So I just started watching porn to figure out how the hell people did it. And now that I am experienced in blowjobs, I realize that most of those porn stars suck at blowjobs. Um, I It depends on what mood I'm in. Most of the time I'll watch things with groups of people because I like to go, I'm hyperactive, and then I like to train my eye back and forth between different groups and, really get, I guess, what people would call a sampler of it. Um, sometimes I would like to watch more porn with guys going down on women, which is a bit of a niche product for a market that's mostly designed for men, which is fine by me. But it's very satisfying for me, as there's I love I love it when my boyfriend goes down on me. I absolutely love it. It feels fantastic. Um, it's just one of my favorite things, and I enjoy watching it too because it gives me those very very sympathetic feelings of having it happen to me as well. It's great. Outside of oral sex, I like I definitely like doggy style. That's a fan. I'm a fan of it. I like being pushed up against things. I like being bent over things. As you can see, there's a bit of a theme here with me being pushed down. I will sometimes do on top. I've been doing more of that lately, um, which also feels very good. Um, I like being on the floor quite a bit. There's something dirty about being on the floor. It's very hot. Although I keep my floor rather clean, I'll have you know. Nipple play. I already said that. Um, I don't like it when I don't particularly like 69. That's just not very comfortable for me. The guy's head is in just the wrong position. He's not really hitting anything. I'm just in the wrong way too. It doesn't hit me just right. Um, I'm not a really big fan of sitting on people's faces. That's not fantastic for me. Um, and it actually hurts whenever how do I phrase that? It hurts. There's like a move that you see mostly in porn where the guy picks up the girl. That hurts for me. I'm very small. Just leave me where gravity wants me. Um, Otherwise, I really have no complaints about sex in general. Really, the main reason why I started the AMA to begin with is the fact that people don't often understand that nymphomaniacs aren't sex crazy so much as there's something just in your brain that desires that constantly, and there's health risks associated with it. Like mine is, I'm not actually allowed to wear underwear because it will make me sick. Um, because I'm obviously constantly turned on and women secrete fluids and it's just not fun. Um, I nymphomaniacs are, I feel like they should be portrayed differently. I can see the sexual appeal of them, obviously. And I'm not about to start a civil rights campaign for nymphomaniacs. There are so many more important things out there. But people misunderstand what it is to be that way. And like I said, it's not a huge deal for me. But I feel like people should treat people who say that they suffer from that with more sympathy, or perhaps with a little more reservation than to, especially women, decry them as sex crazy or just sluts. And that's really my aim, but everybody can take it however they want to. Because you asked. I mean, I have never been one to hide things. I'm not I am not I don't intend on playing with people's emotions. I'm always very upfront. I don't get jealous. I'm not one of those girls who will say everything's fine when it isn't. And when people ask me about things like this, when they ask, frankly, questions, I will answer them, and I will answer them well, because pursuit of knowledge is a very honorable quest.